will just kind of raise their hand, then we'll make sure that Peggy continues this so that, you know, we're not doing this like going on like we're perfectly fine and we're not. So Peggy, can you move it to the next slide? Thank you. So just so you have an idea, some of you have been on SASP grants in the past, but if you know anything about SASP, it does come out of the VAWA office. And this particular grant will be to provide counseling services to survivors of sexual assault. This is a federal grant. It is received through the Office of the Governor. And then TASA serves as a pass-through agency, and we administer this program. And that would include subcontracting it with the organizations that provide these grant activities. So that's where y'all would fall in as well. The following grant opportunity is being offered by TASA. It's a grant for sexual assault programs, again, specifically to provide counseling services to adult survivors of sexual assault that are not eligible to receive HHSC funded domestic violence services. And one of the reasons that's particularly important is that we have put that in our other SASP grants, but some folks sort of miss that piece. So I want to make sure that y'all hear that, because if I get a quarterly report from you and 75 or 80% of your clients are actually domestic violence survivors, it's going to be kicked back. So we want to make sure that everybody's real clear on what the intent is on this particular grant. Okay, Peggy. So this is a one-year grant. It does have some specific eligibility requirements, but it's important to know that this is not a grant that's going to be reissued the following year. Anybody who is on this grant will be able to apply through our regular SASP grant cycle, but not for this grant in particular. We expect to fund 3 to 5 projects. Again, that will depend on how much money is going out into the first, ranked proposals. The applicants will be scored by the TASC staff. This is a little different. We usually will have outside scorers, but considering this money, we're trying to get out by October 1st, the first day of the start of the grant. It would make that process delayed by several weeks if we used outside scorers. So we're doing this as an attempt to get everybody started at the beginning of the grant cycle, and folks not trying to play catch up later. Okay, Peggy. So the sexual assault programs that are eligible to apply for this grant, they must meet the definition of a rape crisis center. That definition is in the funding announcement, so you'd be able to find it there. Meet the definition of a sexual assault program, which is defined in Chapter 420 of the Texas Government Code. Again, you should be able to find all this stuff in the funding announcement. Meet the Texas Minimum Services Standards, hold an OAG sexual assault training program certification, or have applied for it. You must be certified within 6 months of receiving this grant. Also, if you currently have a SAS program grant or an ARP grant, then you would not be eligible for this. Now, I know some of you applied and didn't get those grants. You are certainly eligible for this one as well. Go ahead, Peggy. So the project period would be October 1st to September 30th. Again, we're going to do our best to have everybody informed by October 1st. But please know this could be within a day or two. It's an imperfect science, but that is our goal. It's a one-year grant. Again, I can't stress that enough. It's a minimum of $35,000, a maximum of $60,000. The good news is there is no match requirement for this grant. And then the funding source is also listed over here so that if you wanted additional information, you could look that up as well. So some of the dates to remember or not remember. if you're like me, but it's something you can look it up. So the funding announcement did go out on August 29th, and the application opened on August 29th as well. The final day to submit this application is September 27th. So, we tried to give folks, a month to get this finished here. But it's important because anything that will come in after the date of the 27th of September will not be considered. And then again, the notice of awards and project start date both is October 1st. And again, if we are a day or two late, just know that that's, out of our control as far as the notice of awards. But if you haven't heard by then, feel free to drop me an email and I can give you an update at that point. But that's definitely what our goal is. We anticipate having the notice of award out by the project start date. Your applications will be submitted using form assembly. And if y'all have applied in previous cycles, that's the same way that you've applied for TASA grants previously. The link to the application is in the grant announcement page, and it's right here as well, but it is available on the TASA website, so you can click right in. And I think most people have found that to be a pretty easy application method here. Some of the required documents that will need to come in with the application. We want a signed board resolution with the designated authorized official. Now, if for some reason you don't have a board meeting between when you're doing this application and when the application has to be submitted, what you can do is include a statement that includes when it will be completed, but no later than October 31st. So let's say you have a board meeting on September 30th and the application is due on the 27th. If you just give us a statement telling us that your board meeting is on the 30th and that you would have that to us within a couple of days, that's not going to be a problem. We do need job descriptions for any staff that you are putting on this grant, even, very part-time. So any of those job descriptions, if you can include them all on one PDF, that makes it a lot easier for you and a lot easier for us to be able to read those. Your SATP certificate or copy of the submitted application with proof of submission. So again, if you already have you're already a certified program, giving us a copy of your certification is great. Some folks, if they're just now applying for it, or they've applied but haven't received their certificate yet, if you can just send us like a copy of the email or a copy of the email you received back from the OAG saying that they've received your application, just something that shows us that you have already, submitted for it, even if you haven't completed it. And then again, the work plan and the budget, which will be on that link where you're filing the application. Okay. So the purpose of this grant is to provide counseling services. So, and we're using counseling services rather loosely in that it can be both licensed or non-licensed. These would be services primarily to adult survivors of sexual assault that were assaulted by somebody outside of the family or a household member. Adults molested as children, however, are eligible to receive services for that victimization. And I know that's one of the questions that tends to come up. They're like, well, they were sexually abused by a family member, but it was, 20 years ago, but they're starting to deal with issues in their life and they need counseling for this services. We just want you to know that those would be folks that would be eligible to come in and receive services from you as well. So licensed professional counseling, that could be inclusive of both individual or group therapy. Also non-licensed counseling, and that can also be individual counseling. It can be support groups. It could be, different types of non-traditional counseling. I know some folks have done, yoga therapy, and they've done equine therapy and other kinds of therapeutic models that have been shown to be particularly helpful to survivors of sexual assault. So any of that would be eligible. So some of the activities and costs that could be supported, culturally specific and non-traditional healing modalities. You know, we've had folks in the past who've done things that are more like, you know, healing circles and those kinds of things. Yes, those would be covered. Also, outside contractors, or if you have staff in your employment already that can provide counseling services, bilingual contractors, interns, stuff like that will also be counted as bilingual staff. Now, if you're hiring an outside contractor who's now using a interpreter service or something, no, they would not be considered bilingual. You can still use them, but the points would be different when we're scoring the application. So I just wanted to, you know, kind of point out a little bit of a difference there, because we're assuming that a lot of you probably will try to contract with folks since this is only a one-year grant. So, you know that is perfectly fine and makes sense in many situations here. Information and referral to assist adult sexual assault victims or family household members. Now, this would be in connection with the counseling services. So we don't want anybody to write a proposal for providing information and referral services, and then they're not actually the ones providing any of the services. So that would just be kind of a piece of what you do in addition to those counseling services. Same way with the development and distribution of materials. Those would be on issues related to the services that your agency is providing in the previous eligible expenses. So again, if it's related to the counseling services, you're trying to inform people of the services that are available to them, that would be allowable. If it's something that's completely different and not related to the counseling services, it would not. Population-specific focus services that respect the values, behaviors, expectations, and norms of the community at every level of service delivery. That's something that we hope agencies are doing in general. That's obviously some very important values and services, but we certainly are going to support that if people are targeting specific segments of their community that they feel have not been served in the way that they need to be served. So that is fine. The other thing that is fine is agency equipment. If you need to get some type of equipment, excuse me, you know, whether it's a laptop or a telephone or something that your counseling folks need to be able to provide those direct services, that is an allowable cost. Now, you will see that there is a limit of 10% of your costs that can go towards this kind of overhead or administrative costs, but it's an allowable expense within those parameters. So your sexual assault program, just to kind of reiterate here, must provide the counseling services that can include traditional or non-traditional healing methods provided by licensed or non-licensed professionals, again, primarily to adult survivors of sexual assault. We do allow there to be some counseling services to 14 and to 17-year-olds, but that can't be the primary focus of the grant. That is just kind of like if they're a small percentage of the folks that you're working with, that's fine. What we don't want to see is when we're getting quarterly reports later, people say, oh, I didn't understand that. And so they're providing counseling services to 10-year-olds and 7-year-olds and, you know, other folks who are just not the intended population that this grant is supposed to be serving. Again, not to say that that's not important or that they're over-resourced, but there are other places where that money's coming from, and this is not that pot of money. The focus of this grant is on increasing counseling services to sexual assault survivors by either, again, contracting or partially funding organizational positions for licensed counselors, counseling interns, non-licensed or peer counselors, and other culturally affirming appropriate services or non-traditional therapy practitioners. I'd like to mention the counseling interns for a second. There have been folks in the past who have hired paid counseling interns, like multiple interns who've been able to actually take a lot of pressure off their existing counseling staff by providing those hours. And then the supervision hours of the therapist that is supervising them, then that could go towards that 10% administrative piece. And then you could take these counseling interns, which in many cases are not being paid. But if you're trying to be competitive and you know that that's a way to get some of the skill sets, like some of the languages or some of the specialties that your agency's been trying to pull in, that might give you an upper hand on recruiting those counseling interns. Again, we're looking for programs that are focusing primarily on sexual assault of adults. We will allow 14 to 17-year-olds, particularly if those survivors are from traditionally underserved populations. And by traditionally underserved, I mean by your organization or by other folks in the community. Their needs aren't being met, but they are being sexually abused here. Sexual assault survivors abused by a family member who are not eligible for HHSC funding, funded services, you can provide those services through this grant. Then we know that the vast majority of these folks are eligible for HHSC funded services, but occasionally you will find a situation where somebody is a family violence victim who is trying to get assistance for a sexual assault that they received in that relationship, that they endured in that relationship. We want to make sure that if they're not eligible for HHSC funded services, you can serve them under this grant. Again, your reports will also be completed in form assembly. There's quarterly reports that are due. For those of you who've had the SASP grant before, it's not a particularly cumbersome report that has to be completed, but it is on a rather tight timeline. They don't give us a ton of time about when it's due. So you can see the first quarterly report, which, we're aware that 2 months don't make a quarter, but apparently there are powers that be that aren't aware of that, and this works with their schedule much better. So the first quarterly report will only have 2 months of data, your October and November, and it'll be due by December 12th. So you'll see there's like a 2-week or just under a 2-week turnaround time from when the quarterly reports are due from when the data is finished for that quarter. And then an annual report will be required. Most years it's due like the first week of February. So they give you a little bit more time for that. If you only had the grant starting October 1st, you will only have 3 months of that quarterly report you'll be required to fill out. But it's a little more intensive of a report, but we give you considerably more time to complete that one. There's some helpful documents that can help you with this application. So if you go to this place right here, which is actually on the TASA website, so it's easy to find, you'll find the funding announcement, which I think has a lot of information. If you're kind of on the fence about whether this is going to work for y'all or whatever, this would be a good place to figure that out. It has the grant application questions, the grant application instructions, the work plan, an application, budget template, all of that stuff is there, and a sample resolution for the governing body. So we tried to make this as simple as possible, take the guesswork out of what we're looking for. So I think, although we're available, and certainly don't hesitate to send us an email or reach out if we can answer a question. I would speculate that 95% of your questions can be answered on these documents. And so this is a great first place to go. If you can review the funding announcement in its entirety, I think that ensures you'll have a good understanding of the grant requirement. I've always felt bad for the folks who just kind of skim it and then they start and then they realize after, putting in some work that this is not going to work for them. And so I think it's always good to find that out on the front end before you invest too much time. You can develop your project using the funding announcement as a tool to help plan your activities. So again, if you don't look at the funding announcement, you may be coming up with activities that don't fit in there, and then you spend a lot of time trying to redo it. Use the link to form assembly that's posted on the grant announcement webpage to complete your application. So again, we tried to make it super simple. It's kind of all there on that page, and you can find it. I would also encourage you not to wait to the last minute to submit, because technical issues can happen. And I don't say I'm happy to say, but in the past, we're lucky because the technical issues haven't originated from our end, but we're not naive enough to think that that can't happen at some point. But if folks have issues or the power goes out, at their agency and they're waiting until the last minute to submit this, and then they reach out the next day and say, we had bad weather and our power went down, and so I didn't get it until 3 a.m. the next day. We won't be able to accept it. So please try to get this in a few days ahead of time if possible, so that we can kind of mitigate the possibility of some of these issues that tend to come up at the worst possible time, right? And then after that, you're just going to await the funding decision. Again, we totally expect to send the grant notifications out by October 1st. But I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I know sometimes something comes up and, it's October 3rd before you hear from us. And so I just want to get that out, that that's an expectation that we have for ourselves. But it's not an ironclad promise, because we also may come up against some kind of issues that we don't anticipate. So you can always write, to the email to sasp@tasa.org. The good thing about directing questions to sasp@tasa.org, not just for this process, but if you do get the grant later, is that there are multiple people that get access to that account. So if you send something to that email address, I see it, Tim sees it, Peggy sees it, Marissa sees it, the accountant sees it. And so depending on the type of question you ask, the person that's most appropriate to answer that can step in. And the other thing is if it falls off somebody's radar, then somebody else is likely to remember, hey, I remember somebody asking a question and I haven't seen an answer come across here. So it's just our way to, be more responsive to you and make sure that we're handling these things in the most timely manner. Here's my cell phone number, 512-785-8645. I tend to respond to things even at nights and weekends, but just know if you catch me in the middle of something, please leave a voicemail, because if you don't leave me a voicemail and I don't recognize the number, I will just assume that you're spam or trying to get me to vote for a particular political candidate. And so I just, you know, I'm not going to call back numbers that didn't leave me any message. So again, I'll try to be as responsive as I can, but I just need to know. And you can text that number as well. TASA staff can answer general questions on the grant and on the programming. We cannot assist you in writing the grant or the proposal. So, you know, if you have an idea or you're trying to see if something is eligible, those kinds of questions, we can answer that. What we can't answer is, you know, somebody who's saying, you know, what else should I add on? What else is most likely to get me to the top of the heap, or those kinds of questions, you know? So as much as, you know, we might want to be able to do that, we can't in a competitive process here. And I know I just talked very fast. Yes.
Just real quick before we open up to questions, I know that Annette mentioned the list of documents that are available. One of the things that we've been doing is, like, there's a whole document that is just the instructions on the application kit. There's also a document that lists all of the questions you're going to be asked in the same way that you'll be asked, and tells you, like, if it's a drop-down menu and those kinds of things. So really encourage you guys looking through those before you even start the application. The application is set up that once you get to the end of a page, you should be able to save your work and come back to it later. So that's one of the things we started doing the last couple of years. But again, it's just, you know, I know some folks just take the application questions and turn it into, you know, like a Word document and work on it outside of the form assembly. And then when you're ready, go to form assembly and copy and paste or make the selections you need to. But all of that is there to hopefully try to make it as easy as possible. I know that applications are never 100% easy and they take time. So we appreciate the time that you all who end up applying will be putting into that. But so I'm trying to, like, if y'all folks have questions.
Do you want to have a question?
Do I?
Go ahead.
Are you talking to me? Go ahead. Or okay. So I did have a few questions. I have tested the online portal and used it in many different ways, or to save it, and also go back to a form that I've already used, but it doesn't save my answers. Is there a secret to how that works? Does anyone have a tip?
Interesting.
So when you get down to the bottom of the page, you would need to push save, like, frequently, or anytime, like if you add more and put save, what it should do then, it should ask you to put in a password, and then it's going to send you an email to let you know that it's saved, and with a link to go back in and put your password in, and it should come back to where you were. If that's not happening, then I think we need to get Marissa on that, right?
Yeah, that is what I'm doing, and it's not happening. I get that email and I go to the link, and when I open it, it's empty, like I'm starting a new application.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay, then let us check on that. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
So, I mean, certainly I just did the first couple of pages, so I didn't waste a whole lot of time, but
Yeah.
I just wondered if there's a secret, or if maybe there needs to be a look at that.
Yeah, no, you're doing it exactly how it's supposed to work. So we'll check into that.
Okay. And then I had just two more questions. One is that the instructions indicate that the authorized official is going to be needing to attest to the accuracy of the information and on the application. And so is that our authorized official needing to sign into the document or log in, or is there a signed? How should I plan for that?
So ideally, once you have it done, if you're the person who's filling it out, then your authorized official would actually go in and review it and then type their name in the cell that says that they attest that it's true and accurate. And then once they hit submit, there's a confirmation page that will come up and ask you to submit it again. And that's when it actually comes to us.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
fantastic. And then in the resolution template, the last line says to name the program for the empty slot as language for the template. Did you mean for me to give a name to my program, or can I just put in the sexual assault services program?
Let me look.
Yeah, well, my guess, I mean, well, let's not do that. I think it should be the sexual assault services program, but
Okay.
let's take a quick look.
That's just what I thought.
Shelby, which organization are you with?
The Montrose Center.
Okay, so Peggy, will you look at the template for the?
It could be
Yeah.
the sexual assault services program, but sometimes in other applications they want you to give your program like a clever name or a name. So I just want to make sure I'm putting that right.
No, and you can even put.
Yeah, that would be the sexual assault services
Okay,
program.
that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
So,
Those are my questions.
yeah, Shelby, we'll look into figuring out why it's not letting you go back, but I see where you have to like start an application. So worst case scenario, we can download that stuff and send it to you so that it's not completely lost. And then, but we'll see if we can maybe like open one of them back up and get you started on it. So I'll pick whichever one you started most recently. So we'll troubleshoot a little bit and we'll get back with you, and then we'll let everyone too.
Perfect. Thank you.
Do we have?
You
do
don't
we
even have
like,
to use the resolution template that we offer. It's just a lot of folks. Some folks have a template that they use for resolutions on all their grants for their agency. That's fine if you have your own. Other folks will end up asking, how we prefer to have it and what it looks like. And so it's just there for your convenience.
Okay, thanks.
Tim, do you have Shelby's contact info so we can get back with?
I can put it in the chat.
That would be great.
I have your saved resume email from the application kit. It says resume, but it's the.
Okay.
I have your email.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So, hi everyone. I'm Michaela with the Houston Area Women's Center. I do have a question, and my question is in regards to the DV clients, domestic violence clients. I know you have mentioned that it would primarily have to be sexual assault clients. Is there a percentage for SV, sexual violence, and DV, domestic violence, or our domestic violence clients cannot be served unless they are also sexual assault clients?
DV clients cannot be served unless they are also sexual assault clients. And even them, it's going to have to make up less than 25% of the folks that you're serving collectively on this grant. So it's not a domestic violence grant.
So let me just reiterate what I believe I heard. So we can only serve 25% of clients that are sexual assault and domestic violence survivors.
Yes, that's the maximum. And that can't be the focus. But we also acknowledge that sometimes, especially in a dual agency, it's going to be hard to separate those out completely. But yeah, they will kick back. You will get them kicked back if we find that somebody is kind of taking advantage of that loophole. intentionally or inadvertently. Yeah.
Okay,
And
yeah,
so, Sheila, those are also folks that would not otherwise be eligible for HHSC. So HHSC, you can serve a domestic violence victim that has been sexually assaulted within that contents of the relationship. So to be eligible for this grant, they could not be eligible for HHSC services. Does that make sense?
yes, that helped because you said that the HHSC grant, it serves sexual violence as well as domestic violence survivors, those both coupled together. So they are
Within the
not eligible here.
within the context of that relationship. If they can be served through HHSC, they wouldn't be eligible to be served on this grant. Does that make sense? Did I say that right, Annette?
Yeah.
Did you say would not be eligible or yes, would be eligible?
Would not be eligible. If they're eligible to receive HHSC services, they would not be eligible for this grant. Primarily, this grant is for adult survivors that were assaulted by someone other than a family member.
Okay, I think that was helpful. Thank you.